feel like, so oftentimes people are filled with the Spirit, but their pockets are empty or their pockets are full.
Run it back. I know we started early. Run it back. Lillie, say that again. Go ahead.
Well, I just feel like, too often, people either their spirit is full, but their pockets are empty, or their pockets are full and their spirit is empty. And I just feel like, God has called me to activate people spiritually and financially. Like he wants us to be spiritually whole, but also to be financially full so that we can do more work in the kingdom. So that's kind of, I guess, the long story short of who I feel like I am and what I'm called to do.
Got that beat.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. I have my sister, your sister, our sister, Miss Lillie Mae. What's going on, sis?
Hello. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful. You know when you feel people's energy just emanates through the phone? We're together apart, obviously, in these digital streets. But I was just talking about the art behind her, and I was just like, I already tell the vibe. But it's ironic, even as you and I have talked, I've started our conversation, you were talking about just the pursuit of peace. In the nature of work that you do, one of the things that drew me to the story in your work is that it requires you do things with energy. You hear it in even the script, the language, website, everything you post. It is energy. And I think there's something supernatural about someone who could do that at such a level and carry that energy. That's number one. Number two, there's something supernatural and divine about someone who takes great pleasure in lifting up the stories and the careers and the brands of other people. Too often, I think in these social media times, it is how can I best anoint myself? And I think I give such special honor to people in publicity, PR, because they are literally invested in translating stories, seeing synergies, and helping to uplift the story of someone else. And so I am just scratching the surface because, we do scary research here, but we get introduced here. But I'm so thankful. Who is Miss Lillie Mae?
Well, of course, I am a woman of God. I am a sister, a daughter. I just, feel like I'm a person that's, really on the pursuit, as I mentioned to you, of peace. But also, I feel like, my mission is to activate others and help them, specifically kingdom business owners or Christian entrepreneurs, but to elevate them and help them become highly visible and highly paid. I feel like, so oftentimes people are filled with the Spirit, but their pockets are empty or their pockets are full.
Run it back. I know we started early. Run it back. Lillie, say that again. Go ahead.
Well, I just feel like, too often, people either their spirit is full, but their pockets are empty, or their pockets are full and their spirit is empty. And I just feel like, God has called me to activate people spiritually and financially. Like he wants us to be spiritually whole, but also to be financially full so that we can do more work in the kingdom. So that's kind of, I guess, the long story short of who I feel like I am and what I'm called to do.
This is, I love saying this, and I just love the territory we're in already, because I think some people think that's mutually exclusive. We had my sister, Terry Ijeoma on, and she's been doing such amazing work, helping people, 1,000 a day in trading, and just sees how we're called to be stewards, right? Of nothing we have, we own. And that particularly even all through the biblical narrative, so many of wealthy people that God used, like it's not a negative thing. It's like that power in and of itself. It's not negative. It's what you do with it for the kingdom and for the people around you. I'm curious about, like, when were you first activated yourself? And I'm not even just talking about, I'm talking take us back. When you first recognized that, I think I'm called to be a steward to, like, help get these people to Bruce Leroy glow. Like just at what point did you recognize that you were the plug in more ways than one?
Well, to take you back. I guess when I first recognized that, I definitely wanted to achieve financial freedom and help people do that was when I was a kid. And as a kid, I grew up in extreme poverty. I would see people outside shooting at each other. I've seen people do drugs at night. My mom worked third shift at night. My little sister and I would hear gunshots outside of our window, and we would hop out of the bunk bed. So it was, very much so like a scene out of Boys in the Hood. That's the environment that I grew up in. And I just knew that was not the environment for me, and that I was just called to do more. Now, the flip side, even though outside of our home was extreme poverty, violence, and things of that sort, my stepfather was a deacon, and my mom is one of the most Jesus-loving people you will ever meet. So inside of our home, we were very close-knit. There was definitely the Holy Spirit present. We went to church many, many days out of the week, and I was on every choir and usher board and all those things growing up. And so that's where I recognized that there was a disconnect. Like, wait a minute, we're in poverty, but my mom loves Jesus more than anybody. Where's the disconnect here? And so as a child, that's when I first recognized that. And fortunately, that environment activated me to become very academic. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and then, I moved to Atlanta after that and started in entrepreneurship consequentially. And then it's kind of like that, as, my own personal life journey pushed me back further into my relationship with God. I would say when I really woke up to, okay, I'm supposed to activate people on both areas will probably be back in 2013. I started hosting these empowerment events, really just for women to have business talk. And when I say every event, the Lord would hijack it. It would not be a Christian event per se, but the Lord would come in and we would be talking about God by the end of it. And then, I started intentionally bringing in women to pray and, intentionally adding facets to this event that, really spoke to like our spiritual life, our Christian walk. And so I think that's when, all of the pieces with my life story and my, academic expertise and my ambition merged to really, help me realize like, wait a minute, I'm called to activate people in both spaces, if that makes sense.
I love this. It's kind of like the providentiality of it all, right? So like, I just want to get people together to talk about business, right? Because I'm in business and I want to see, I just want us to kind of exchange best practice, try to be around each other's energy. And then it seemed like an energy took over. And you're like, okay, I recognize it. But it's still, there's like, okay, I understand though now the why of like, okay, wow, I see God's doing something here. It seems like there's something here, but there's also something about gifting, right? I think for many people, I even had this in the conversation today around so much of the struggle and this, let's just call it the lack of peace that people have is that they feel lost. Or they feel as though what they're doing is not in line, like they don't know what they're good at. They don't know what they should be putting out into the world. And so even from having those events, when did you get to this point when you recognized distinctly that you had this translation gift, right? Because I just think when I think of a PR and you're a communicator, you're a translator, your brain, like just how did you go from that moment of, okay, God, there's something here to, all right, now I need to, I actually have a unique gift in this. Like, what was that process of getting there?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it wasn't necessarily like an active thought that I had, but it really was my ambition that really like took me on this course. So for example, as a kid, I would always get in trouble for talking too much. I would finish my work really quick and then start serving people. So I would always get in trouble for talking, right? So then fast forward into college, I was doing really well in communication studies and things like that. I got 2 internships with Universal Motown and their publicity department in New York and Atlantic Records. And so all of these amazing experiences just kind of came into my lap, so to speak. And so it was those things that was like, wow, I really enjoy this type of work. And then when I moved to Atlanta, I kind of transitioned into it. So it's like, I can't identify a specific moment where I like knew that I had that gifting. It was just like the momentum has really followed me throughout my life. I always say that we all have favor and we have favor in different areas oftentimes. And I feel like I just had favor in that area. So I was always talking, always writing, always talking, always writing. And opportunities were just kind of being laid out to push me in that direction of, serving others through like publicity. So I honestly, I can't say when I realized about, I like had a specific realization about that gift, But here recently, I would say within the past 6 months, is when I really began to acknowledge my spiritual gifts. And that's very recent. I had a lady that prayed over me in a clubhouse room about 6 months ago, and she was praying over something totally unrelated to spiritual gifts. But while she was praying, she said, Lord, I ask that you help Lillie develop her gift of intercession. And I was, in the prayer like, huh? Because that's not what I actually pray about.
That wasn't on the request list, fam.
Correct. That wasn't on the request list, but okay. And then fast forward, now people are reaching out to me for prayer, and, I'm praying over people live in Clubhouse and things like that. And it's very much so out of my comfort zone. But I realized, like, wow, there is a spiritual gift there, a spiritual gift to, intercede and pray over people. And even the gift of prophecy I've recently discerned in the past 6 months. So I could definitely pinpoint when these spiritual gifts, when I realized, whoa, it's not just business and public relations. There is some stuff in the spiritual realm that God is seeking to activate me in. And it's been happening very rapidly within the past 6 months, for sure.
Oh, this is dope. I'm going to hold that because I want to go back to that piece, right, of like being, recognize the spiritual gift and like, oh, snap, I have this. And, oh, I didn't recognize this. This is uncomfortable. But, I've been essentially ushered into this piece. But then also just the reality of, because I think they go hand in hand. I think the reality of the work you're doing. I wonder, like, in what ways do you feel that God, how does like just your lens and your spirit lead how you do it differently? And what I mean by that is that I think that there's so many, I think it's a relationship business, right? In many senses, right? You maintain relationships, how you maintain relationships, how you pitch, how you have conversation. It's not this one way, it's win-win. How did it affect just your model? Because I think for some people who are listening, a lot of times they compartmentalize the faith as this private, pious thing and think it does not wash over how you even execute and do your work. And so even when you think about that, and I'm going to come back to the spiritual because I think it's connected. How do you actually think about your work and your execution and your processes and your relationship management with the kingdom lens?
That is like a dynamic question. And I feel like the kingdom lens, it makes me operate in excellence, right? Like that's what kingdom lens is. So any of my communication, like even you mentioned my energy prior to having even really met me, but it's like, that's the kingdom lens of it, is operating in excellence. So I try with every interaction, with every pitch, to always operate in excellence. So communicate effectively, to be energetic, to only take on projects that I feel passionate about. Like, to me, that's operating from a kingdom lens. I always encourage people to only take inspired action, because that's where the God ideas differ from the good ideas. Some people are just doing work to do work. And it's like, no, that's not how I operate. I only take inspired action. And that's where I mentioned earlier about flowing with the spirit. So that's how that, kind of, I guess, permeates my business, is I really try to operate in excellence, even with the Glambitious brand that I've created, which is a little separate from the publicity, like, a high volume of interactions I have, but people are always surprised at how quickly I respond to their emails. They're like, oh my gosh, you responded immediately. And that is that spirit of excellence that's on me. Like, I want to give people the best interaction I can possibly give them. And I'm not perfect, and I have bad days like everybody else, but that's where the kingdom lens affects my operations in my business. And that is why I've been able to be an entrepreneur for over 10 years, because that is the heartbeat of my business, is operating in excellence, treating people well, and having pure intentions with everything that I do.
This is, I love this. I had Sister Chanelli Martin, on, and I think she is family. She's family here, and just the importance of discipline, the importance of excellence, like that's part of how, there's a saying, I remember even there's a saying about like, Jesus the carpenter, there was no crooked legs he ever built. Right. Like as a car, it was excellence. Like the perfect being couldn't be imperfect. I think people lose that. Right. And no matter what season you're in, part of, this perfection, eternity pointing, identity we have is this. There was harmony, perfect harmony and excellence in everything. Details, 5 cubits, 10 cubits, this long, these robes, this stuff. It's about that. But I'm going to joke on you because I think like, yo, whenever you have to bottle up that quick email response, bottle it up and sell it. Because I know there are people in ministry 1 second or 1 week. Like, you know, it's like either I'm going to hit you in a split second or it's another week. But I'm not saying I'm part of that team. But I do think this is dope. It's a dope perspective to have. Because I think it gives integrity to everything you do, no matter what role you have, that your spirit of excellence carries the spirit of God into rooms, into interactions, and that ultimately allows things to come full circle. But I think there is something to be said about just the faith of it. You said something about taking inspired action, right? That's an inspired faith, because a lot of people, I think in a lot of these businesses where, in some business verticals where it's retainer business, it is this, it's like, yo, they, you know, early on, I have to kind of take on this business because it's going to pay most of the bills, and I don't, you know, but I'm going to get bigger to a point, and then I won't have to take these clients. Like, were you that bold early on, you know, in your career, where you're like, you know what, was it always, you know what, you know, I'm a fold to the end, you know, Cleo set it off. You're like, bump that, right? Like, I ain't taking any of these things. Or initially you said, you know, I got to crawl before I walk, but I know where I'm headed, and I want to be able to say no and trust that God will provide in these inspired areas. What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, no, I definitely did not start off like that at all. Absolutely not. Well, you know, when I first started out as an entrepreneur, and I was very young. I mean, this was 15 years ago. So I was in my 20s. And so, you know, I was very much driven by the ambition of accomplishing certain things. And so, of course, like you mentioned, as an entrepreneur, you have to pay bills and things like that. So back then in my 20s, you know, I was just trying to be a great business owner. But now, as I'm much older, you know, I can't sacrifice my peace for a paycheck. I refuse to do it. And I did that a lot in my 20s. And I would take on clients, and I knew immediately my spirit didn't resonate with them, but I would take it on and pay the bill and then be stressed out for 3 months. It's like, it's not worth it. So, you know, now, you know, consequently, like, I have always been very ambitious, and I know it's going to sound cliche and nobody's probably going to believe me, but now it's really not about the money right now. Honestly, I can honestly say it's not about the money. Yes, I do hope that, you know, there's significant abundance and millions in my future. Hey, that would be great. But that is not what wakes me up in the morning. That is not what makes me take on a client. There are weeks sometimes when all I'm doing, or I won't say all, when mostly I'm just sowing money into other kingdom business owners, and my business isn't making as much as I'm sowing, but God is like, sowing to that person, sowing to that person. I'm like, all right, God, I'm pressing send on the cash app, like, but I need some sales too. But, you know, I just flow with it. And when I tell you that God always shows up in exponential ways, I almost feel like, you know, he's testing me to see, like, will you be obedient, whether it makes sense or not? And so I feel like that's the season where I'm in. So I'm, you know, it's not about the money. Like, I've sold so much this year that, and it feels good to sow. You know, I don't hold it tight. In my 20s, when I first started in business, you know, I was holding on to things tight, like had this lack mentality, like there wasn't abundance out there. But now I just feel so free-spirited about it that, you know, the work that I do is really honestly not about the money, although I'm very ambitious, and although I do want to create generational wealth, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. I think the natural question for people, even tactically, is, you know, how do you walk in humility and ambition? And what I mean by that is this piece of, and I'm going to take almost maybe a different angle, and then you could fill it all in, right? There's this piece of recognizing your limits. I come from family entrepreneurs. Sister, dad, mom, like everybody was building businesses. And like, I think, especially when you're building business, knowing your capacity is, I think, an act of humility. Like, can I actually take on this client and fully service this client well? Like, what is my capacity? Because it sounds like your mortality. Like, well, I can't do more, or no, I can just create my systems more efficient. Like, how did you get to a place of understanding what your capacity is? Or was that still a journey of saying, I can take on these many clients? That's great, but I can't deliver some level of that. And then two, how do you even think about the concept of ambition and humility, and how best you know, I don't necessarily think they're mutually exclusive, but just how do you think about that in your mind in terms of what it tangibly looks like for you?
Yeah, so as it relates to like my capacity in business, you know, I feel like, you know, the more that God blesses me with, like you kind of touched on, the more systems and staff I'll hire. So it's not necessarily for me, about capacity in the sense of can I handle it? It's just more so about am I interested in this work? You know what I mean? So people reach out to me, but I'm really I have people all of the time that need publicity that are, hip hop entertainers. And I used to represent hip hop entertainers years ago, but that's not where I am. So I have to, turn that business down. So it's not even a literal capacity. It's more of a, not to be too churchy, but like a spiritual capacity, right? No, so I feel like, when you are dealing with a spiritual capacity, there's a qualitative measure to that capacity, not a quantitative measure as we tend to think of capacity. So there's that. I hope that answers that question. It does. Okay. And then your second question was about ambition and humility. I think the humility for me, it just comes from knowing what my source is, if you know that if your identity is truly in Jesus Christ, if that's where your identity comes from, there's no way you can be arrogant. How can you be arrogant when you really know your source? There's no way that you can be, how can you be arrogant when you know who woke you up and who's provided for you and who's kept you when you were sick and who comforted you at night? How can you be arrogant? To me, it doesn't even align. So the humility, I feel like for me has come from just my spiritual growth, my spiritual wisdom, life experiences. And that's just come with age. I don't think I've ever been like a mean person or one of those arrogant people that, think, they're holier than thou or better than thou or anything like that. But I definitely had to grow spiritually in thinking that I was in control of things. So that was a bit arrogant in my 20s, feeling like I was in control of things. And, life humbled me to where I know, oh, nope, this is, I always joke that my life is a movie. I'm the lead actress, but God is the director, right? So he's directing this movie. And with that, it just allows me to have the humility, and the ambition is just a part of me. Is I've always been that way since I was a kid, just an achiever. So that's always going to be there. But, I'm a spiritual being first. Yeah. And then, so that's why that is, more important. And that's where I guess the humility comes from. If that answers your question.
I think this is it's refreshing to hear, right? Because I think for you, it's you say it very matter of fact. You're kind of like, I know where it comes from, right? Like, I ain't give this breath, right? Like, so there's that. Exactly. But there's also this piece. I think the reason why I talk about this as being a timely conversation, because I think many people struggle with rhythm, sustainable rhythm of life. Right. To, I believe in the power of working hard. Our own work ethic, big work, right? Like there's dignity in work, right? There's beauty, power in work, and it does so much for the world. But I don't know if in our times and in this generation, and I'm saying intergenerationally, we've gotten the boundaries down, because I think many people are struggling with the ambition, but then the other parts of their life being taken over or neglected, right? Brothers and sisters, right? Where it's like, work is like water. It takes up whatever space you give it. So how has that journey been for you in the nature of the work that you're doing, how have you kind of like sought God in God's guidance, and how do you create sustainable rhythms? Like, even though this gives you energy in life and you're gifted to do it, how did you make sure that your relationships, your family, all those other areas of your life that are important were not neglected?
That's a really good question. And definitely earlier on in my entrepreneurship journey, those things were neglected. There were baby showers I couldn't plan. There were things that I couldn't be a part of in the family, trips and things like that. So earlier on, those things were definitely neglected and sacrificed for entrepreneurship in my 20s, I would say. I guess, now, gosh, I'm in such a different season than I was when I first started my business. It's vastly different. I think who I am is just so much vastly different. But now, I think that everyone I'm glad that you touched on that rhythm piece. That's really good. I think that everyone has a different rhythm, right? And so like my rhythm cannot be Chanel Martin's rhythm. Like I told her, I was on the phone with her the other day, like, girl, you be up at 4 in the morning.
Yeah, then she was like, I ain't gonna do a wake up with Chanel. I'm like, yeah, go to sleep. Like, go to sleep.
Right. So, I am realistic enough to know that everyone has a different different rhythm. And so for me, making God a priority in the morning, you know, is what sets the tone for my rhythm that day. So it's a different rhythm each day. You know, I do have priorities, which, you know, like my mom, I definitely, you know, I'm going to make time for her. I'm going to make time for my sister. So, you know, I don't know if there's an exact rhythm to it, but I think there is a priority list, and that is what guides me. You know, I wake up with God, you know, I spend, you know, time in the prophetic planning room that Chanel hosts. Actually, I host my own devotional, and then I get to business, you know, and then when my mom calls, I stop business and I take that call. So I think my rhythm is untraditional. It's because I really am flowing with the spirit. And I know that most entrepreneurs do not necessarily have that rhythm. You know, they have a schedule each day. They have certain hours that they work each day. And me, I totally don't. Like, I just flow with the spirit. If I'm energetic, I get the work done that day. Yesterday, I was not energetic at all. And I didn't do much other than get my workout in, talk to my family, and watch television. And I was at peace with that. But today I'm energetic. This is the day that I schedule a lot of things, consequently have them scheduled. This is the day I get up early, I get it done. So I don't know. I'm just in a space of flow. Like that is what my rhythm is these days. It's just flowing with the spirit. And I do think that we have to recognize seasons, because there's seasons to down and there's seasons where you get up and you get to it. And I just feel like I recognize what season I'm in, and it's just a season of flow. And my spirit has been telling me that things will speed up, and when that happens, I'll rise to that occasion as well. I was so long-winded just now.
No. You know, this is perfect. You know, I remember talking about earlier about how, again, I think your just the wisdom that you've been able to just accumulate over time and your experiences, I think is appropriate for these times, ripe for the times. Because I think even your idea of flow, so much has been disrupted. I don't want to even over-index on just the times that we've been living in over the past year, two years plus, kind of nearing. But there's something to be said around, you know, what's most important. You know, it's not so much the inputs, but the outputs, right? To say, you know what, you know, with work, companies have had to reimagine and rethink what actual work is. And like, okay, if we're not in the same place, but if things are getting done, that's a different rhythm. Like it's the outcome, it's not the input, right? So it's actually a positive rhythm for family, right? Okay, great. We have some we're more proximate. So what does rhythm look like to connect, to talk, to get out, to see each other? I think these are important times where I think people need to speak into, okay, how do you actually be intentional about this new rhythm? It sounds kind of like, how do you be intentional about new rhythm? But I do think this is appropriate. There's this other piece, I think, around like just storytelling. And I think this storytelling piece, and I've always been intrigued, particularly in this time. I think that we live in this, I think part of the challenge of our times have been what I call what's happened systematically in this country, and how it's affected, I think, the diaspora, the Black community, relationship between brothers and sisters. That's something that I passionately talk about, right, in terms of redemption, that being a part of the kingdom vision. And even in the nature of your work, it seems like this is also part of your heart and your call, even talking about Black Men Succeed and different work that you do. What inspired this work? What was that moment where you're like, I need to put this together. I want to be a part of something like this. What was it that spurred that on for you?
For the Black Men Succeed specifically, or just, okay. Well, yeah, you know, in 2013, I started the Glambitious Brand for women empowerment, right? So that was so many years ago. And so it actually had maybe 2 years ago, I was like, man, you know, just talking to my guy friends and things like that, I realized they really don't have like a community where they like tap in and empower each other. And so I was like, man, you know, these dynamic conversations that I'm being able to have with women through my platform, I want my brothers, you know, to have that space too. And so that's why, you know, I created Black Men Succeed, because I want to contribute to the narrative that Black men are successful. Black men love Black women. Okay, Black men are smart. Black men are healthy. And it's just everything that is like, you know, the counterculture was just, it's just so ridiculous to me of how they portray the kings of our community. I'm like, no, I want to tell a different story. And so that's really what inspired, you know, Black Men Succeed. A, I want to tell a different story, like a real story. And then B, you know, I want brothers to have like a community where they can be inspired, just like I have so many different communities of women that I can tap into. So, honestly, my hope for Black Men Succeed is that a brother comes in and sees what I've created and he takes it and runs with it. I just want to put it out there, but I'm hoping that at some point a man of God wants to take that and make it his version of the Glambitious thing that I've created and go. So I just kind of planted the seed and I hope that it continues to grow.
Oh, no. There's seeds that get planted deep, but they sprout high. Right. And so I just think that where that comes from is a powerful thing. And I was also so intrigued because as a sister planting that seed, right, of, hey, I want to do that. And I do think it's a refreshing, thing to see. But to your point, I think we're in these times. I've been having these conversations with brothers in media, like senior guys, and sisters as well about, it seems like something's happening in the atmosphere around like this redemption of our narratives, our stories, right? Beyond the symbolic covers and then the the non-changed back end, but like actually our stories are actually taking the forefront. And there's something about reclaiming that. And I think that's part of the responsibility. How do you think about even the responsibility? I think now you're talking about inspired work that you do and the people that you represent. Do you have a criteria? Or is it that you you kind of tap into just the Holy Spirit and say, does my spirit jump or does it move? Or is there a criteria framework that you kind of bring to the work that you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. It's not as holy as you just said. It's my spirit.
Yo, that was a layup. She's just like, well, I'm gonna lock that. I'm gonna tumble that one down. And I'm gonna go back out with
However, it's really, what feels good to me. So, especially when it comes to publicity, it's like what story feels good to me. So, for example, Grammy award-winning singer Chrisette Michele, she's created an Inner Peace Academy. And so, I talked to her like, I would love to help get some publicity for the Inner Peace Academy, because that is a dynamic, I think, effort to actually build an academy that helps people achieve peace, so that was a story that did make my spirit leap. And so then I was able to confirm like a Black Enterprise interview for her. But yes, with, the publicity side, I definitely look for stories that, I get excited about, that I feel good about, that I want to help propel and tell those stories. And then when it comes to, the other things that I create through Glambitious, opportunities, events, courses, it really just, ideas just fall into my head. And I'm like, that's a great idea. Let me move on it. So for example, I'm hosting a faith plus entrepreneurship virtual event in August. And so, the goal is to bring together men and women of faith that are entrepreneurs so that we can share our stories and encourage other people to pursue